Good evening to everyone. I'm Rolly Matalon. I'm one of the rabbis here, together with my colleague, Rabbi Felicia Sol. In our community, our BJ community, we welcome everyone here tonight and all the people who are joining us on live stream. There are hundreds of people who are here tonight. And the reason there are hundreds of people here tonight, maybe 1,000 people here tonight who registered, is because we're all devastated, all brokenhearted. We don't see how this ends, when it ends. There's so much pain, so much death, so much trauma. And we're all looking for something, some light, some hope. And just the title of this organization that we're hosting, that NIF, New Israel Fund, is hosting tonight, Omdim Beyachad, standing together, is already something beyond. And so there's hope in that possibility, that hope that there are people who, in all the complexity, in all the pain, in all the everything that broke, that there are people who are still Omdim Beyachad, that there are people who are still standing together to try to figure out. Because, you know, after all is said and done, and we hope everything will end soon, and there are no more deaths, and the hostages will get back home safe, after, the day after, Arabs and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis will still be neighbors. And they will have to find a way to move forward. Nobody's going to leave. Nobody's going to be eradicated. And so Omdim Beyachad, standing together, is the path that gives us a little bit of hope. So I know it's not pie in the sky, and it's not, everything is so simple, very complicated, but at least there's the will to move forward together. And so I would like to introduce Rabbi Janice Elster, Senior Director for New York and Tri-State Area of New Israel Fund.
Thank you. Thank you. As was said, I'm Rabbi Janice Elster, and it's a pleasure to introduce myself as the brand new Senior Director for New York and the Tri-State Area. I started the day after Yom Kippur at the New Israel Fund. That's the general reaction, but I have to say I feel very lucky to be doing this work at this time. Thank you so much to B'nai Jeshurun for graciously hosting us in their space, and to our other co-sponsors, Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, Congregation Rodef Shalom, and J Street. It is heartening to see such a robust turnout. It speaks volumes to your commitment to engaging with the crucial work of NIF and our esteemed grantee and partner, Omdim Beyachad-Naqif Ma'an, standing together. Their role in our emergency response work following the October 7th attacks in Israel and the ensuing conflict has been critical. For those of you who are new to NIF, welcome. We are the leading organization supporting liberal civil society in Israel. Alongside our grantees and partners, we strive to build a stronger, just, and vibrant democracy. We fight inequality, injustice, and extremism because we understand that justice is the precondition for a successful democracy and the only lasting road to peace. It is a mission we've been dedicated to for the past 44 years. NIF works to support the most marginalized groups, and through this current conflict, we've continued to be guided by the principle of universal humanity. For those of you who are already part of the NIF community, thank you very much for your ongoing support. The outpouring of that support over the past month has been unprecedented, and we thank you. Today's conversation couldn't be timelier. We are joined by two leaders in our shared society work who embody what a true Arab-Jewish political partnership looks like, especially now under the strain of current tensions. I'll stand over here. I'd like to introduce Sally Abed and Alon-Lee Green, leaders of Standing Together, a grassroots movement mobilizing Jews and Palestinians from all over Israel in pursuit of peace, equality, and social and climate justice. They haven't even said anything yet, but we know it's going to be good. Sally Abed is the elected national leader at Standing Together, the Jewish Arab grassroots movement that mobilizes people around their core issues. In recent years, she has become a prominent progressive Palestinian voice in Israel. Sally is a recurring guest on the Promise podcast and co-host of the new podcast sponsored by NIF called Groundwork, a series about Palestinians and Jews refusing to accept the status quo and working together for change. Alon-Lee Green is the national director and a founder of Standing Together. He got his start organizing Israel's first trade union of waiters in a chain of coffee shops and went on to found Israel's first national waiters union. Alon-Lee emerged as a prominent leader of Israel's social protest movement in the summer of 2011 and subsequently served as political advisor in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. To facilitate the discussion this evening, I'd like to introduce NIF's Libby Lenkinski. Libby is the Vice President for Public Engagement at the New Israel Fund, where she leads all aspects of NIF's public efforts in the United States. Before joining NIF, Libby lived in Israel and worked in the Israeli nonprofit field for almost a decade, including as Director of International Relations at the Director of International Relations at the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, and is a strategy consultant for human rights organizations, media initiatives, and progressive campaigns. After our panel discussion, we will have time for some brief questions. If you have a question, please write it on a note card that you can take from the table at the back of the room, and our staff people will be walking around during the program. Please give the note card with your questions to a staff person before we conclude the panel discussion. Staff will be circulating throughout the room and can be identified by their NIF tags. On behalf of Standing Together and the New Israel Fund, we are so pleased you have joined us for what promises to be a powerful evening. Let's warmly welcome our panel.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Rabbi Roli and Felicia, and our friends here at B'nai Jeshurun, and all the co-sponsors. I'm speaking a little bit less clearly than usual because I got braces on October 5th. So we're going to bear with me tonight, and I'll just try to slow down and enunciate. I just want to say a couple of words about this conversation, and then I'm going to stop talking. I know that a lot of us are coming in tonight with pain, with questions, with frustrations about what's going on there, what's going on here, what's going on our Facebook feeds. And I'm hoping that focusing on work that's happening right now on the ground will be a little bit of a balm for some of that. We will try to address a lot of what's going on across Israel and across the world, but we're going to focus on what's really happening there. I also want to say that this is a bit of a high-stakes conversation. It's being live streamed, and this isn't a time where it feels particularly easy to talk about these issues with nuance, compassion, and humanity. We are all three, as well as all of the co-sponsors of this event, very committed to doing that. But I'm going to be moderating with the live stream in mind, and knowing that they're flying back to Israel in just a few days where some things are dangerous to say in a variety of ways. So we'll talk more about that as well. But first, I really want to start like 8 years ago so that we get grounded in what standing together actually is and what it's about before we talk about what you're doing over this last month and what it means. But just bring us up to speed on what is the purpose, what was the impetus, and what is standing together overall.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Masal khair. All right. Standing together, it's going to be 8 years old in December. And it really was started to be founded, and the very first sprouts of it started almost a year and a half after Tzuk Itan, yet another operation in Gaza. Up until then, it was the deadliest, bloodiest attack on Gaza, where also around 4,000 Palestinians died, and many, many hundreds of Israeli citizens also died in the south from rocket launches. Right after Tzuk Itan, which was, by the way, 3 years after the social protest, just giving you a context of how it really started, we had what was called the individuals intifada, or the knifing intifada, where we saw a wave of attacks of Palestinians attacking, suicidal attacks on Israelis in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, which was really also a very, very difficult time in Israeli society, where Bibi Netanyahu had a very famous statement where he said, "Le'ulam nichya al kherev," we will forever live on the sword. And the people who really founded Standing Together did that under two main fundamental values and understandings. One, we refuse to forever live on the sword. The status quo that was then, that we are seeing now, that is still maintained throughout the darkest, perhaps the darkest, really, junction in our society, as well as for my people in Gaza and our society in Israel, it's still that status quo of living on the sword. And we understood that we need to shift the paradigm. We needed a new political protagonist. We needed a new politics. We needed a new majority that envisions both Palestinian and Jews under the very deep understanding that the majority of the people have the interest in ending the occupation and in peace and in equality and social justice. And that was our mission. That was the very main fundamental of building a new movement, a new political protagonist, a new kind of politics. And we will talk a little bit more on how we do that later. We hope it becomes clear how we're doing that. The second fundamental was that it's not enough to mass mobilize people. 2011, up until then, was the largest mobilization in Israeli society. And if you really look at the wave of mass protests that happened around the world, including here, Occupy Wall Street, it was the largest mobilization, and really it was not enough. It was not enough, and we understood that we needed to build a vessel, we needed to build a movement that can actually contain and build and lead a new ecosystem of this new political current, and build sustainable power for change, one that really organizes and mobilizes both Palestinian and Jews, but really not just Palestinians and Jews. It's much beyond that. It's the marginalized groups, all all of the marginalized groups in Israeli society that really connect to the struggles for peace, equality, and social justice. And since then, Standing Together really has been growing. We feel very grateful to meet this moment while we are organized. We don't feel grateful meeting this moment. We feel grateful meeting it as organized as we are and being able to react the way that we do and have those spaces of this new political protagonist and have those organized spaces to be able to create and really expand it and extend it to as many Israeli citizens as possible. So that's just very, very quickly about Standing Together.
I'll say on behalf of myself, and as I'm looking out and sort of taking stock in my head of who's in the room, I see so many NIF supporters, past, present, future, staff members, board members, longtime supporters. We're very grateful that you were able to meet this moment as organized as you have been. I won't speak for anyone else, but my social media feed has just been all purple for a month. And maybe
We're purple.
that's their color. So I do want to ask you what that has meant, what has happened with Standing Together in the last month, and what are you doing that's helping at this moment?
So first of all, thank you very much for having us. Thank you, Libby. Thank you, the staff of NIF, for your support. It wasn't an easy choice for us to decide to leave Israel for a few days and to come here. But we felt it was important because we felt that the message that we're bringing with us of the work that we're doing in Israel to try and create a different kind of equation where both people can benefit from a different reality, where when now both people are losing from the reality, is something that can maybe relate to the situation that you're having here also in the States or internationally, where you have to pick a side to say, I stand with Israel or I stand with Palestine, and there's no grounds in the middle, where you can say, I stand with the lives of people living there. I support the fact that both people deserve life, both people deserve security, both people deserve the ability to survive this moment. And this is why it was really important for us to come. And I guess it brings us to the question of what we're doing. And I think the first thing that we're doing is to try and to speak with our society, to speak to the Israeli public, both Palestinian citizens of Israel and Jewish citizens of Israel, and trying to really look at this moment and understand that in our darkest moment in history, really the lowest point, a moment where we are all in a collective state of trauma, fear, really fear controls every corner in the Israeli society at the moment. When we are going to funerals, to shiv'as, when we're trying to stand in solidarity with each other, there are political forces that are wasting no second to advance their extreme ideas that they feel can grow even further on this fertile soil of feelings of trauma and fear and revenge and rage. And those political forces have started to advance those ideas of resettling Gaza Strip. I don't know if you heard it, but there are ideas to really have new settlements, Gush Katif back on Gaza Strip. Those political forces, and maybe it's important to say that up until the 6th of October, we were protesting against our government, hundreds of thousands of people in the street, having actually the support of the majority of the people in Israel in polls, because the government was losing in polls even before the 7th of October. Now they're like massively losing. But we were really protesting against our government because it's the most extreme far-right government in the history of Israel Those are people that are advancing ideas of Jewish supremacy, of racism, of narrowing down the democratic freedoms and dismantling the Supreme Court. And you know what's going on with Bibi and Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all of it. But those are also the people that are in power right now. They are leading Israel through this dark moment. And they are the people that are backing those ideas of resettling. People that are sitting in TV studios every evening, promising us that it's either us or them, saying that we will be able to eradicate Hamas, which is not something we feel that is even, there's no work plan of how to do that. There's no something that they promise that is really viable, saying that the children of today are the terrorists of tomorrow in Gaza. The children that we spared in 2014 are the people that committed the massacre of 2023. Some of the news channels are actually putting a counter, a running counter, a graphic counter on their screen, counting the casualties in Gaza, saying 10,000 terrorists died. And they refer to the children and babies that died also as terrorists. Those people are trying to create new fronts. One front in the West Bank, where we see a really rise in the settlers' violence as we speak, backed with guns that are being really circulated, like handing guns by the police to organized right groups in the settlements, but also inside the Israeli society. We see how those right-wing groups, ministers, parliament members, are trying to open up a new front, pointing on the Israeli Palestinian community, the citizens of Israel that are Palestinians, portraying them as people that are siding with Hamas, people that are supporting terrorism, traitors from within, trying to really create an environment of tension and violence. And we recognize the dangers. We recognize the dangers that what is on stake at the moment is either, and it's very important to say, it's either an internal war that the right wing wants to take us to, or it's an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. That's really what's on stake. And they want to lead us to this internal war. So what we've been doing in the last 4.5 weeks is trying to organize our society, the Jews and Arabs in our society, into standing in solidarity with each other. We've created Jewish-Arab solidarity watches across the country, doing activities of mutual aid, of helping the people that got hurt in the massacre of Hamas in the 7th of October, trying to open up bomb shelters, cleaning them together, Jews and Arabs, putting up signs of directing to in Arabic and Hebrew, directing to the bomb shelters, and also trying to monitor calls for violence. Maybe Sally can actually talk about it a bit later, about what's going on with the Palestinian community in Israel and how it's been persecuted at the moment. But there is really a feeling of persecution, and we're trying to lower the tension, to de-escalate this moment in the Israeli streets. We're trying to create the feeling that Jews and Palestinians are in this together. We have no choice. We're suffering together, we're afraid together, and our solidarity watchers are trying to create this feeling. I guess maybe it's better to talk about the hotline and all the persecution, but yeah, that's the main.
I do want to say that, when we talk about the Israeli society who is being traumatized right now, we do, I think in many ways, one of the biggest questions we have as organizers, as activists, as people who are, not trying to be the absolute righteous, but actually try to build popular demand, which can be very different things to do, is really understand where people are, the emotional state of people. And right now we are really recognizing that the Jewish Israeli public is in a place of really an existential threat. And that emotional state is something that has strategic and political implications. At the same time, we are also experiencing, as Palestinians in Israel, a very different kind of existential threat. And it's seemingly contradictory. And I think the very mere fact that we are able to put people who are, feeling those two seemingly different existential threats in one room and recognize that our existence on this land, on that land, is just dependent on the other. And the fact that none of us will be equal and safe without the other being equal and safe. And just shifting that experience from an existential threat as a Jewish person or as a Palestinian to the duality of it, and to the shared fate that we have right now that we really need to move forward with. And thank you. And obviously, the Jewish sentiment is out there. It's everywhere. It's on the news. It's out there. It's very, very visible and felt. The Palestinian experience is not. Our identity, our existence, our political experience, even our human grief for our people is being criminalized right now. Not only delegitimized, not only witch-hunted, criminalized. People are being expelled from work, from universities, being arrested, we're being harassed, and it's crucial for us as a movement and as a leadership to not only combat that legally, which is very important, and we are working in hotlines to really provide and navigate and provide the necessary support for people, but to create the essential, critical space for Palestinians right now to feel safe to grieve and to feel safe to exist. And I think right now, they are trying to erase us. There is an expectation for us to just vanish. Don't talk. When they talk about, Beyachad Ninatseach, Achdut, right? Like togetherness. We're an outsider for that. Even our grief over the lives of Jewish Israelis, which is very, very real, by the way, is being conditioned as an outsider. So I just want to reiterate that under the very deep understanding that, we are allowed, not only allowed, we actually have the duality of the experience of grieving for both peoples, because that's literally our lives that are intertwined. And this is exactly the space that we need not only maintain, but expand as much as possible in this moment and going forward, because this is the space that's going to define how Israeli society will look like going forward.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned. I also want to say a thing myself that I think maybe you would want to say, but I want to say it because I'm not flying back to Israel in a few days, which is that you were like sort of pointing towards some asymmetries that exist in terms of power and threat. And I think even in this moment of incredible tragedy the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust in one day, we still know that for many, many years there has been that asymmetry. And in this group, in this synagogue, in these organizations, we have raised a voice against the occupation, for equal rights, against the siege on Gaza for many, many years. That doesn't change overnight because of the grief, the shock, and the tragedy that we feel. And it's from that place that I want to pick up on the question about futures, because Alon-Lee, you talked about the two choices, forever living on the sword, forever living in war, or a solution to the conflict. And we also started to talk about the connectedness between Palestinians in the region, wherever they live, including inside Israel, which is the focus of Standing Together's work. For many of us, like longtime followers of, participators in progressive movements in Israel, we've thought of the peace movement as somehow distinct from shared society within Israel. And so I want to understand from you how those pieces are connected for Standing Together, and how you think that connection brings about a different kind of future. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to remember that right now, the war that is going on in Gaza, the massacre, the trauma, the pain of all the people living on this land, it is still part of the status quo. It's still part of the very long years of policy of managing the conflict, of maintaining the conflict, of thinking that somehow it's possible to live a normal life, maybe meeting your friends on Friday morning, talking about how was the week, going to a cafe, when 14 minutes from you in Tel Aviv, there are 3.5 million Palestinians living under the military occupation of Israel. They are not Israeli citizens. They don't want to be controlled by a foreign army. And 1.5 hours from you in the west and south, there are 2.2 million Palestinians living in a siege with no freedom, with no ability to live, with Israel counting calories of how many things you can bring inside. And this conception that you can maintain this, that you can just live a normal life and this will not explode in our faces, this is history. But the problem is that the reaction right now of our government, the policies that are executing at the moment are still part of this status quo. They have no work plan of what to do in Gaza. They have no answer of what will happen there after this war. They have no answer of where are we going and how this war, in opposed to the 16 other, cycles of war in a decade and a half ago, is going to really bring security. They do say this time is for real, but they said it also in the other times. And we do understand that that really, really raises the question of how can we break out of the status quo? How can we really point in the different direction? And what we're saying is that there is only one option ultimately to achieve security. And it is, again, Israeli-Palestinian peace. It is working with the understanding that millions of Palestinians are going to remain on the land, and also millions of Jewish people are going to remain on the same land. Both of the people call this land their homeland, and that's a fact. If someone really questions this fact, they're delusional, really, because it's really not something you can question. And what we're trying to create is this understanding that right now, our government doesn't have a work plan. Our government doesn't have an idea of how to navigate this moment. And what we're trying to do is first bring the society of the Israeli people, both Jewish and Palestinian citizens, together, because if we are able to hold in our mutual space, in the shared space that we're creating in Standing Together in our movement, we can hold the space we've been assembling. Every third day now, we're having a Jewish-Arab solidarity rally in a different town or city in Israel. It started in Tel Aviv, it moved to what was it,
Abu Ghosh.
Haifa and Abu Ghosh, and then Baqa el Rabia. Hundreds of people are coming to each assembly. And if we're able to hold the pain and the grief and the suffering of both people in this shared space of the Israeli society that is mixed of Palestinians and Jewish, that's the start of the answer. That's the start of the solution. This is the understanding that we need to push forward. This is the only way to really address this moment. If you are asked to pick a side, if you're asked to ignore the suffering of the other people, if you're asked to become blind to the fact that also in the other side, innocent people want to live, you are part of the problem and you're not part of the solution at the moment. And this is why we also thought it could be smart for us, even though it's really not easy for us, to detach ourselves for a few days from Israel and to also try and understand, how to help, each other to navigate this complicated moment that you're also suffering here. We've seen the polarization, we've seen, the expectation of this zero-sum game. You need to either stand with this side or with this side. But the real fact, again, is that there are people on the ground and no one is going anywhere.
I do want to add something. Maybe? Can I add something? Yeah? You asked about social justice and how we are actually doing that. I am a Palestinian, but I'm also a young woman who lives in Israel. And I have two options. I can either isolate myself from Israeli society, depoliticize, and be righteous, right? Just be righteous and talk about our very, very justified demand for Palestinian liberation and for equality for me as a Palestinian in Israel. That's one option. And that option doesn't leave me any leeway or any opportunity or any really ability to impact or to build any kind of political will within the Israeli society. None. I have the other option to take responsibility over the society that I live in. Yes, it can be a very racist society towards me. And this racism comes from a discourse from a very systemic, methodological discourse of lack of trust, of incitement, of misinformation. And I could come, but I can't come to Israelis, the majority of them in which are in the margins of the social, economic, realities of Israeli society, and come and tell them, liberate me. What I can do is take responsibility with them as an Israeli citizen to actually make our society a better place, while also claiming my identity as Palestinian. And that was your question, really. What is our mission? What are we trying to do? What is necessary for peace, for my people to live freely and equally in our homeland? We need a popular demand from the Israeli public for peace. And to do that, I need to take responsibility over the society that I live in. And to do that, I necessarily need to be relevant and to be a young woman who is also a victim, not only as a Palestinian, but as most of the people that are being victims of the inequalities and the injustices that are happening in Israeli society. And that's the theory of change that we're trying to build. That's the strategy that we're trying to build. And there's no other way for me to do it. There's no other way. I have two options. Isolate myself, be irrelevant, and relinquish any kind of ability for me to impact my society, or actually build popular demand. And it's critical for us to do that as Palestinians and Jews in Israel. And that's what we're trying to do right now as well. Understand how I can approach the Jewish public right now as a Palestinian Israel, which is the hardest and most important mission we can do right now.
I like the questions so much. I like them so much better than the ones I was planning, so I'm moving to the questions. This is a particularly favorite one. Will Standing Together run for the Knesset as a political party in the next election?
You're going to be so disappointed.
Wow. So, okay, I guess it's we are trying to build, and I think we can say it very openly, we are trying to build a new political current in the Israeli society. A new political current which is a new kind of left where Jews and Palestinians can be equal in the same political project, when it's actually reasonable that Sally here, that described herself just a second ago as a young woman with needs of housing and equality and maybe social justice and environmental justice, she's suffering from the same problems of the Israeli society. And I'm a young man in Israel. I'm Jewish, she's Palestinian, and I'm suffering from the same problems. But it is still not reasonable that Sally will vote in one ballot and I will vote in the same ballot, because the Israeli political system is segregated. And what we're trying to create is a new kind of political idea where if we have equality in our problems, maybe we can also have equality in our political action and in our political existence. And this kind of idea is a revolutionary idea for the Israeli society, right? When we chanted in 2011, probably some of you know the main chant of the social protest. It was Ha'am Doresh Tzedek Chevrati. The people demand social justice. And it was the first time in Israel's history where we used the word Ha'am, the people, not as the Jewish people or the Palestinian people, but the people of Israel that has common interests, that can share something together. And that's a very core idea of standing together, of what we're trying to do. And coming from that, saying that we're trying to create a new political idea, a new political stream, we also need to understand something important. And is that ideas, changes, big political victories are not happening because one day a group of parliament members woke up on their, better side of the bed, or a prime minister woke up and said, today I want to give women the right to vote, or I want to end, the civil discrimination of black people in the US. Those changes happened because of social movements, because of people that were committed. In the beginning, small groups, but then larger and larger, they were committed to a change. They were committed to fighting for a change and to organize their societies into building a majority. It is very interesting, I'm sure, to be a parliament member and to deliver speeches in Israel parliament. I worked in the parliament for 5 years as a political advisor. I know it can be interesting, yes. But the influence of 4, 6, 8 parliament members can be much less than the influence of a large political social movement, and that's what we're aiming to do. To create this change is a historical mission. To create a change of ending the occupation and achieving peace and equality to all the people on the land is so historical that it will not be enough to have one political party, even of 12 seats. Yes, we do want to have one day representation to the political idea, but first we need to organize our society.
Yeah, but when are you running for office?
I mean, obviously, part of our project is incubating and developing the leadership that really advances our vision and advances our political current. Not just through the Knesset, by the way. Just right now, we are, organizing students who are running for student unions. That is a very political project. We are I am a political candidate in the municipal city, in the municipal elections in Haifa. I'm leading a Jewish Arab, socialist progressive list. It feels like an elections campaign
Tell
in the
your
US.
family to
Wrong
vote
audience.
in Haifa.
And that is, in many ways, the new ecosystem that Standing Together is building. We are envisioning an ecosystem of new movements and new leaderships and new institutions that can really incubate this kind of leadership that can go into the Knesset at some point, but building a people's movement that is nonpartisan, that is able to work with so many of the spectrum right now on the Israeli politics is also essential to our work.
I want to ask, sort of on behalf of two questions together, about how you view what's happening on the quote-unquote other side. Meaning, when you're thinking about the movement that you're building in Israel, are there counterpart movements that you know about in the West Bank and in Gaza? What's your relationship with individuals, groups, and others that are outside of Israel proper? And you can take that in whatever direction you would like.
Start, you continue. Okay. We need to understand that we acknowledge the privilege, not the privilege, the position that we're in. We are, Libby mentioned and acknowledged the asymmetry, and we understand that a lot of the political will and power needs to come from Israeli society. I also acknowledge my privilege and my position as a Palestinian who has an Israeli citizenship and who has, many of the tools that I can use. I have the language, I exist in Israel, I can run for municipal elections in Israel and actually advance change there. And we need to understand that in Gaza and in the West Bank right now, people don't have those democratic spaces to advance the change that we are talking about. We talk a lot about how they are attacking our space, which is also very dangerous. But that space in Gaza and the West Bank is obviously much more under threat than ours. With that being said, obviously we also know that there are initiatives and organized groups and movements in Gaza and in the West Bank that are trying to build a popular demand. Obviously, it's funny to say that Palestinians want popular demand for peace. As occupied people, obviously there is a popular demand for peace, but the understanding is how do you build a popular demand for peace that acknowledges, Israelis and the Jewish Israelis as also part of there. And it's a very, very difficult question because you need to understand that they are positioned differently than Israelis. They are positioned differently. We see many initiatives. We actually try to work on capacity building of some of the movements, especially in the West Bank, who are trying to build a more liberal, progressive peace work that is also beyond. We see a lot of the peace Oslo Accords industry in the West Bank, which is very, sorry for that, but it's very NGO infested and very just not really trying to do anything that is actually organizing people and building real power. And we're trying to impact that through communication with some of the movements there that are trying to do that. We acknowledge the importance of that. With that being said, I also want to make it very clear. I think a lot of the responsibility is held within our society in Israel. And that includes me as well, as Palestinian in Israel. And I think in that sense, I also not only assume responsibility over the Palestinian society in Israel, but over us collectively as Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza, in the diaspora. And it's a lot of responsibility to assume, but I also acknowledge that immense privilege that I have.
Thank you. That's quite hopeful. Yeah.
This is the first time I'm asked that, so I hope that, yeah.
I want to ask one more question about there before I bring us here to America. My question about there is from a card. This person, I'm also asking this. This person was just in Israel, and people that they saw were seeing this moment potentially as an opportunity for a positive political change after. And, you know, Alon-Lee, you keep mentioning and reminding me that we were all out in the streets for a year up until October 6th, including here. I mean, including many of us, protesting the government, the most extreme right-wing government in Israel's history. It's still the same people in power, but their favorability among Israelis has shifted dramatically. And so what does that mean? And do you both see it as an opportunity for positive, these are hard words for me to say with my braces, positive political change?
Of course, it's an extremely dangerous moment. It's a moment where the right wing is really trying to navigate our society into even darker places. And as we have a war going on in Gaza, we have another war over the question of what kind of a society we're going to be. Are we going to be a society that endures calls for genocide? Are we going to be a society that really allows ourselves to be really, you know, closing our eyes to this immense pain on the other side and killing? And I do think it's important to remember that in the fight that is going to be developed over the political question of who is going to remain the Prime Minister of Israel, and it's obvious, it is very much obvious that in the minute that there will be a pause or ceasefire or anything, there will be a massive protest against Prime Minister Netanyahu and his own government. It is obvious, but stay with me for the but, really. We need to remember that it is not possible anymore to disconnect the areas of the damage that the right wing is causing the Israeli society. It is not possible to say, I'm going out to the streets just because they're hurting the Supreme Court and ignoring the fact that they are maintaining the occupation, that are building more settlements, that are arming the settlers. If you think you can say, I'm against Netanyahu just because of the corruption, but I'm blind to what Netanyahu is doing to the safety and security of the Israeli people and the pain he's inflicting to the Palestinian people, then you are creating a strategic problem. We cannot ignore that anymore, that everything is connected and the status quo is not maintainable any longer. So our role, standing together's role, will be in the protest that will come the minute after this war ends, or even now during the war. Our role will be to extend the window, the overtone window, and to create a massive movement demanding Israeli-Palestinian peace and ending the occupation. This is the real core issue of the Israeli society. It's an existential issue at the moment. It's live or die for us. And I do think we will have a battle in this protest movement, as we had a battle before. And I think it is so important to remember that we have the ability to be a wonderful society. We have the ability to be so much in solidarity with each other, to be showing help and support and loving each other, and we love our society. It's an amazing really ability and opportunity to love the place that we come from, to feel the pain, even though it's so painful, but to understand that it's the only home that we have. And fighting for this home is fighting for it being the home of all of us. And that's the protest we need to create.
Amen. This is literally a question on this card. What will the chant or rallying cry be for that movement? And I'm asking it not just to be cute, but because, as I said, lots of people in this room were out there protesting the government, calling against the judicial reform, whether it was in the sort of mainstream protest or the Gush Neged HaKibush, the anti-occupation bloc here. Many of us are here in the room. There's Israeli Americans here, as well as American Jews, as well as many others. We want to know what we need to be chanting. What's the bumper sticker? What's the rallying cry?
Can you give us 5 minutes for a creative brainstorming? And I can imagine us like just going as a leadership and getting the chance.
I mean, if you don't...
It's a good question, but I do think the core question is equality. It starts with the question of equality. It starts with the question whether you believe all people should have the same rights, the same equality, the same life in this land. And if you don't believe so, you're putting the lives of your own society in danger, because none of the people in the world will accept this kind of reality. So maybe it can be שוויון זכויות לכל הקהילות?
Equal rights to all the communities.
No, but communities is like not. Yeah, we'll need to come up with something. But you get.
Help us.
We'll
you
get back
can
to
put
you.
ideas back when you're like leaving. Yeah.
I really love how you are talking about building a new left. I'd like to ask whether you'd be willing to come here and help us build a new left too, because it's really tough out there. And this is a question also on the card, and also something I've been wanting to ask you, which is, we are, and Alon-Lee, you said this when you first landed, you were like, I came from a war zone, and I feel like I'm in a different war zone here. And I think that we are experiencing a lot of stuff in our communities that is related to what's happening on the ground there, but is also different and distinct and is American, and it's happening in our communities. And with that context, I want to ask, what have you seen so far from allies and people abroad from Israel that's been helpful, and what has been unhelpful?
Okay. Helpful. The helpful has been the validation that the message that we are getting out of the field, get out of Israel-Palestine, is one that is needed here. And I think it is a validation. I don't think I would have wanted to admit how impacted we are by the conversation here, and also how much we impact your conversation. I was telling Alon-Lee today, I'm like, damn, like I didn't, like now realizing how much our work is impacting people here. I'm like, damn, like we need to, we like there is work to, like I feel this responsibility now to make the outreach here and really understand. Yeah,
help us.
I think just the outreach as well. What is helpful is really the understanding that there needs to be a sync and bridging the gap between the Israeli left and the American left, which I think is a little bit disconnected right now. I'm trying to be like. Soft. Okay.
You can be soft. It feels disconnected.
It feels disconnected. I think a lot of the fractions of the American left are grossly overlooking us and grossly overlooking our experiences and grossly looking our mission, as well as the challenges that we go through and the way that we need to do things, and also just the very, very basic facts, 2 facts. One, that both Palestinians and Jews exist, and they're not going anywhere, and they both have the equal rights to exist. And 2 is the political, and I said it, and I will say it again, the popular demand within Israeli society is a critical piece for any Palestinian liberation. And like, you can't overlook us, and that's the disconnect that I'm feeling. And it's really, I'm saying overlook, but sometimes it's literally like just dismissal of the lives of Israelis, which is very problematic. I can talk about the right wing, you know, in the US, but that's like, I don't assume responsibility over that, like, because they also don't agree with the fundamentals that I have of my right, my equal right to exist on the land, so I'm not even going to talk to them, right? And I think what's not been helpful is exactly that, that disconnect, and just the almost the judgmental, you know, for me as a Palestinian, to not be able to talk to me as a Palestinian in Israel and really understand, you know, the complexity that I am in, and therefore not being able to contain the complexity of the messaging, which is, and the gap between that and the righteousness, right?
Thank you. You have more? Thank you. Today, we're sitting in a Jewish space. It may not be only Jews in the room, but it's a synagogue. And this person and me are wondering if you're meeting with non-Jewish groups, Palestinian American groups while you're here. If so, what are you hoping for, or what have those experiences been like? If not, what would be helpful bridging that we could do outside of the Jewish community as well?
Yeah, so we are here with a mission, as we said before, to also try and bring forward an idea of building a middle camp, a camp where you can feel the pain of both people, you can talk about the interests of both people, you can acknowledge the fact that both people lose from this reality, and you can demand peace because both people will profit from this Israeli-Palestinian peace. And this is why we're also meeting with a lot of people. Some of them we're very disappointed of, some of them we've read things that they posted and we felt like it doesn't, you know, take us under consideration or even acknowledge our existence. But we are trying to have as many meetings as possible to try and convey this message and to say that, you know, in Israel, you can wake up in the morning in the Palestinian city of El-Fahim or Nazareth, turning on your Instagram in the morning and seeing stories and pictures of dead babies in Gaza, of dead children. And then you can wake up in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, being Jewish, and turning on your Instagram in the morning and seeing pictures of dead children in the Gaza, in the south of Israel, or kidnapped people to Gaza, and to be sure that that's the only reality. And what we're trying to do is to say that both reality exists at the same time. Both reality are terrible. Both reality are realities that need to be changed. And what we're trying to say is that it shouldn't be that complicated also to do it here in the US, to understand that if you want to talk about decolonization, you can do it in the library of the New School. You can have you can even have an essay, and I promise I will read your essay at the end, and we'll try to discuss it, and we can have, you know, lessons about it. But if you try to change the reality, you need to be speaking about Israeli-Palestinian peace. That's a solution. And Israeli-Palestinian peace has two components in it. One is Israeli, the second is Palestinian. You cannot overlook one of the societies and only talk about the pain of one of the societies. So the camp that you need to have here, the kind of left that you need to have here in the US is a kind of camp and left that takes under consideration both people and talk about the profit of both people from this peace, because this is the only solution. I, as a Jewish person, and Sally is a Jewish Palestinian woman, we are not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. Both of us will remain. So you need to acknowledge that.
I always tell Alon-Lee, don't say the middle, say new, right? Because it's not the middle, really. It's just new. It's a new kind of approach. And you said about Palestinians here in the U.S., which, you know, we are meeting some individuals, hopefully also some, you know, elected officials and leaders who are doing this, and less Palestinian political organizations. Unfortunately, I really hope that I will be able to do that. I think it is very critical. I did speak up many times about the heartbreak that I have from the fact that I am not invited to these places, that I am not, you know, being stuck in my mission to build popular demand within my own society. I am seen as irrelevant to that, which is one of the most heartbreaking things for me. I do think that we also need, you know, while we talk about this new middle, and that's why I don't like to call it that, it's new, we also do need to acknowledge the context. We need to acknowledge where Palestinians in the diaspora are coming from. And I think we are able to do that. I think we are able to do that. And acknowledging the lives of the Israelis and the Jewish Israelis and their rights to exist, and the cost that they are paying for the occupation, you know, while not symmetrical to the cost that the Palestinians have been paying for 75 years, is still very real, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be, you know, part of the conversation. And I think what is difficult in that is there is, for many years, has been some kind of maintained conversation that really overlooks, you know, the gross and methodological and continuous violence that the Palestinians have been enduring for decades. And we need to hold that context and acknowledge it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I think the Jewish community needs to also do that while enduring this catastrophic human loss of Jewish lives in Israel. It also needs to hold and acknowledge the unfathomable oppression, violent oppression that Palestinians have been enduring for decades. And I think this is key for us to really bridging and getting to Palestinians here. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm glad you said that. I feel like I sort of set it up about the left, and that was also on the card. I also know that since the beginning of Standing Together, maybe more than almost any other Israeli NGO that I know of, you've actually had a lot of connection with the global left, with the American left, with the American Jewish left. And so I'm hearing the specific feelings about that. And I also know that here in the United States, we have at least as strong a demand that our Jewish community will acknowledge equality, will seek justice and equality and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians. last night we had a small event, and Alon-Lee said that we were talking about the sort of feeling of disconnect between a more academic or theorized conversation and the stakes for people on the ground, which is actually survival. And Alon-Lee said mentioned the new school, and then the first question was a really lovely friend who said, "Hi, I'm a professor at the new school, and I'd like to ask this question." And it's as important to be thinking about what we need on the left as what we need in the American Jewish community for work like this. So thank you for unpacking that. I always say this on NIF webinars and at NIF events, that I can rely on the audience to always ask the most important and most generous question. And it comes up, I mean, I have 3 cards here out of my 7 saying, what can we do to help you? And I think we really mean it. What can we do to help you? And I can start by doing the uncomfortable part of that, which is give them money. I do work at New Israel Fund, so, but I also think that as people based in America, American Jews, Israeli expats, American citizens, we can draw really on 2 sources of agency. One is, how do we support this kind of work on the ground? I'll let you answer that beyond my shameless pitch for money for you. And another one is using our voice vis-a-vis our own elected officials as American citizens. J Street is a co-sponsor of this event. There are many groups working in the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community trying to bring our voices as American citizens to our elected officials so that America's foreign policy and policy towards Israel, Palestine is equitable and supports this kind of vision. But that's enough of me answering the question that I asked. I'd like to hear from you how we in this room and beyond this room can help you.
So, yes, it's obvious. If you can donate, please donate. It can really help us really grow at this moment and deal with this very complicated moment on the ground. But further than that, I do think that what happens here in the US really influences what happens in Israel. Do you know your Secretary Blinken is actually a member of the war cabinet in Israel? He sits there almost like maybe once a week. And the administration is being influenced by what the American public is doing and demanding and moving, and I think the Jewish community can have a real say with President Biden. And the role that we're expecting to see is the US administration helping us opening up the space in the Israeli society by legitimizing the call for Israeli-Palestinian peace as the only alternative to the endless war the government is trying to create. And right now, when we're saying it in Israel, we might sound naive, we might sound like traitors, because the word peace in Israel equals like being a traitor for some crowds, not all. But if more and more countries, more and more leaders in the world will bring this to the table as an alternative, as a viable, real alternative, and if we can create an umbrella of countries that will push to this direction, that can help our work on the ground. And I think this is something we need to see happening here as a demand. Don't just say, I support Iron Dome, I support Israel, my heart is broken. This is good, okay? But demand from the Israeli government real demands. Don't give them an open check and tell, Israel can do whatever they want and still get the hug of the US. We need to see a real demand to end this status quo, this reality that our government created with their own. And do you know that it is a real quote of Netanyahu saying that if you want to prevent a Palestinian state, you need to support Hamas? Do you know that the Minister of Finance, Smotrich, said the Palestinian Authority is a liability, but Hamas is a strategic value for Israel. So it's an open policy. It's an open policy of our government to strengthen Hamas and to weaken the Palestinian Authority, because they know that that's the only way to tackle the ability of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, or to actually achieve peace. And you have influence in that place. You can open up a space for us to really have a better stand in our society. So that's one thing. And I think another thing is to really try and work on the atmosphere that is happening. You know, we've been blamed as Israeli left, as the left of the Israeli left. We've been blamed. What's left of the Israeli left? Yeah, we can do a lot. The Israeli left, yeah, a lot of things, yeah. But we've been blamed for some of the responses that have been happening in the international left. People came to us and you see, that's you, that's the left. You say Hamas, committed a massacre and it was part of a freedom fight and stuff like that. We need to see a change in atmosphere. It is a crucial, task that you have upon yourself to create a productive, a constructive conversation here that will help us also show that there is a big camp demanding peace as a solution for the lives of both sides.
Thank you so much.
Another thing.
Yes, another thing.
Just it's a very small. I don't know if someone of us have a camera here, but we've been doing assemblies every third day now in Israel, in Arab towns, in Jewish towns, in mixed cities, trying to bring people together and to say we stand together, Jews and Arabs, in this, even in this tough moment, or especially in this tough moment, we're pointing in the direction of partnership and Israeli-Palestinian peace. And I think it will really strengthen the friends of our members in Israel if they will see this crowd. And if we can send them a picture from here, showing them that you also came here to listen to us. I think it can be cute.
I have to tell you that there's a best kept secret here in the American Jewish progressive community. An event didn't happen unless Gili Getz is here taking photos. So we have a camera, we have Gili, we will take the photo. You can use it on your social media. We're very happy about that. I am going to ask Rabbi Janice to come back up to close this. I will just say from my own self and from New Israel Fund, first from New Israel Fund, we're very, very proud to support you today. We have been so proud to support you since the beginning. I have known you, Alon-Lee, for a very long time. I would have voted for you when you were just a senior in high school and we were protesting together, and I would vote for you now. And I wanted to share a text that I got from the author, Michael Chabon, after last night. Heard Sally on a podcast. Listening to her was like hearing a crystal goblet struck with a knife. Pure tone. Janice?
Wow.
Well, I'm not sure how to follow that. Michael Chabon. Janice? Not in the same sentence. I think we can all agree that we're very glad that you came. And we know it wasn't easy, and we're really appreciative of the time. And I think I want to thank you for sharing your stories and your work with us. And I think we can all agree that it was very moving and informative. And I want to thank the team who put this together, the New Israel Fund team, and our partnership is so important to us, as Libby said. And it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to hear the voices of those who are choosing a different path, not one of hate and conflict, but instead of embracing peace and hope. Standing together, as Libby said, is an important part of NIF's core work and has been a critical part of our emergency safety net as well. As you've heard, they're working to strengthen Arab-Jewish solidarity and promote a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If you haven't already, we encourage you to support the New Israel Fund and Standing Together. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or any of the NIF staff members in the room. Thank you for your solidarity and support. And may peace come in soon. And Rabbi Saul is going to close this evening.
Thank you again. I'm going to invite everyone to rise, if you're able, in body or in spirit. We'd like to end with a prayer that the hostages return home safely, and then one final moment. Misha berach avotenu Abraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, v'imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless, protect, and guard our missing brothers and sisters who are in distress and captivity. May the Holy Compassionate One bring them out of darkness and the shadow of death. May God break their bonds, deliver them from their distress, and bring them swiftly back to their family's embrace. May there be fulfilled in them the verse, those redeemed by God will return. They will enter Zion with singing, and everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. And let us say, Amen. And I just want to end also by saying we have yet to write the prayer that needs to be written for you. There are plenty of prayers written that are for the state of Israel. We have many prayers, we have many psalms, we have many songs. But there needs to be a prayer that honors the work that you're doing to build a new story. And we are home for that. And there are many thousands of people who believe in you, believe in that vision, and we are committed. So I'm just going to invite us, since that prayer has yet to be written, to just spend a moment in silence acknowledging that it needs to be written, and the prayer is already written in our heart. It just needs to be put on the page. So let's just spend a moment in silence in gratitude for your incredible work at a most difficult time, but all the more so that it's needed so desperately. We are with you, and we are going to not only pray for that vision to be realized, but for the truth to come to existence. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.